Hi, welcome back to the SwiftFox build project channel, and this is another build update video. Now, I don't have a lot to talk about today. There hasn't been much progress since the last video. Okay, maybe there's one or two things I can talk about. Let me jump out and we'll start the rudder pedals. All right, so the rudder pedals are done and installed, and I'm really happy that this task is over. It took a really long time. It was a bit of a slog. But now that they're in, I'm really happy. In the last video, I did kind of outline the plan I was going to do for putting them in. And a couple of days after posting the video, I did get a comment on the video, I think from a guy called Jim. It was a pretty sizable comment, and it outlined the way he had worked on his rudder pedals and installed them. And ultimately, it persuaded me to change my plan just a little bit. Originally, I was going to just chuck these bearings into a drill press and sand them down from there. But Jim's comment persuaded me to try the lathe method instead. Now, I don't have a lathe, but my hangar neighbor Chris does, and he's building a Super Cub. So I shot him a message, asked if I could come up and have a go on his lathe to see if I could get these down to size. Chris, of course, said no problem. So when he was back from work, I went up there for a day, hung out, and we got working on these. A couple of things to note. The first one is that we found when we were trying to pare off the material using I don't know what you call it, but like a chisel type end of a bit, we found the material wasn't really coming off in so much as it was melting and being pushed. So you would end up just pushing a bulge of material across. We tried various different speeds, but at no point was it really kind of cutting material off. It was just melting it. So in the end, I did just end up sanding, using sandpaper to take it down to the size it needed. But even with the lathe, that was much better than a drill press. It could be much more accurate across the whole length of the bearing. Did do the dumbbell shape as well to account for the weld here. So they all fit really nicely after doing that. And the other thing we noted was the manual does call out you might need to pare it down a little bit. It's oversized. It can even be tough to get the pedal over it. It's so long. So you pare it down as needed. The first one we did reduce its length, but we found then once we torqued it, once we assembled it and torqued it, there was a lot of rubbing happening between the pedal and the bracket. So I had to put a couple of washers in there to bring it back to a length that it wouldn't rub. So for the remaining three, we didn't pare them down at all until we kind of assembled them in, torqued them in, and saw what they were. And in fact, one of them, even without reducing its size, once it was in place and torqued, there was rubbing, so I had to put a washer in there. And it was pretty tough to get a washer in there because the pedal clamps over it like that, and it is stuff was exploding everywhere. It was a couple of hours of wrestling there. But they're pretty nice now. They're moving smooth, even with the master cylinders here. Everything is moving pretty nice. On installing the whole assembly, so you clamp them down, you back drill, etc. I kind of clamped them all and then drilled. I think something I would do differently is I would start on one end and I would move in one direction. And the reason for that is what I ended up doing was slightly getting this bracket probably a touch too far forward or far back, such that the line is not a straight line and it's more like this, if I'm to accentuate it. And that was pretty much because I measured, set the distance, set a clamp, set the distance, set a clamp, set the distance, set a clamp, and then drilled. When really I should have, set all the clamps up, drilled, and then reset here, drilled, and then reset here and drilled, just to make sure I got that straight line. It was okay in the end. The bearings in here I just needed to kind of slightly taper so that they weren't rubbing on the walls of the torque tube. But it's just something I'll know for again if I'm ever kind of setting something up like this. The other thing I did was I set the rudder pedals in without the floorboard being there so that I could make sure I got the bolts centered on the rail. I would recommend that. It made it so much easier. I did place the pedals between 1.25 inch further aft than what the manual says as well. The reason for that was where the manual said to place the rudder pedals, the front edges of these brackets were sitting on a weld bead that was kind of a little bit proud. So I moved them back just so that they wouldn't be sitting there and wouldn't make the angle of drilling diagonal. It's not affected by the floorboards because I do have shims on the bottom of the floorboard and it accounts for those welds. But I obviously I hadn't the floorboard installed when I was doing the drilling, so I couldn't use that. I think it came out fine though. I know other people have had the rudder pedals way further aft and been fine, so I'm not concerned at all about it impacting any geometry or anything like that. The Behringer brake cylinders are in as well. I'm going with the Behringer brakes and wheels. These were a relatively quick install. One problem I did have with one of the cylinders was, you gotta set the height of these to a certain value, and that's by taking the top off, bringing the check nut to where you need it to be, and then putting this back on. One of them, I couldn't actually get this piece off. It was rotating the shaft as well. So I did have to get in there with a vice grips and do some ugly type of stuff, but the threads were just not very clean in it, but it ended up being fine in the end. So all in all, a lot of effort, a lot of time, but happy that they're in now and I can move on. Yeah. So with that done, let's talk about floorboards next. So floorboards are all done, both here in the cockpit and the baggage area, which I'll show in a couple of minutes. And I'm really happy with how these came out. Probably spent a little bit too long on them, if I'm honest, but the process of learning how to do carbon fiber was really enjoyable, so I don't really regret it, if I'm honest. They trimmed up really nice. I've got a couple of coats of clear coat on them as well for protection. And there are a couple of imperfections here and there on each of the panels, but most people have told me I'm the only one that can see them, so I'll take that. And to be fair, they'll be under some upholstery anyway, so no one's really going to see it anyway. But they came out awesome. They're super light. One change or addition I might make to them is just here. I may add some support down here. This is where notionally your heels will be sitting when using the pedals, so might just put some shims here to support it. There are shims in a number of locations, which I had to do to make sure the floorboard met the tab that it's mounted to. And then I've mounted these in with keyed riv nuts, which seem to be pretty much a common way for most folks to do it today. And I used keyed ones to make sure that they never spin in the future, because that's meant to be a really bad time if your riv nut starts to spin. So they're all installed with keyed riv nuts everywhere, so that won't happen. The side panels of the console are also installed. That was a pretty quick job. Just had to wait until the floorboards were in, the rudder pedals were in, etc. It's also secured in using keyed riv nuts, and I probably should have used countersunk riv nuts, but I really only thought of that afterwards. It does mean that there's a little bit of a gap here. But this edge, it's pretty bad at the moment. I used a shears to cut it, and there's kind of a couple of kinks. So I might see about tidying up that edge in the future, and if I can do something to kind of close in the gap from the head of the riv nut. But otherwise, it's fine as it is. So let's talk about seat pan. So seat pan is, call it dry fit at the moment. I've really just trimmed it so that it sits into the fuselage and that I could sit in it. So all the edges are still relatively rough and need to be finished. I haven't cut the slots for the seat belts or drilled the holes for the mounting bolts or anything like that. It's literally just trimmed to sit in there. The covers for the underseat storage as well, I'm definitely going to change those to a carbon fiber plate, but that'll be a project I do much later. For now, I think it's Perspex or polycarbonate will do for now. But this actually was quite a quick job to do to get it in, quite enjoyable. Couple of things. I originally was just going to start by, trying to like get the notches for these in, but ultimately what I did was I got a 1/2 inch dowel. I've got about 5 foot length of it, and I used that under here and marked out where basically the seat pan stopped touching the wooden dowel, went a couple of millimeters further than that, and then drew a line there and trimmed that, and that meant it's sitting on the bar now quite nice, but there's not a lot of excess material going past it. So it did that on the back and front, and then that made it much easier to notch out these things for the fuselage bars, and also for the control stick. It's sitting kind of off of the bars now slightly, but once you sit in it, it does sink down onto the bars. So I am going to sand a little bit on the underside just to make sure there's not a lot of interference with some of the fiberglass stuff. And then I do know you got to put some weight into it to drill the holes, because you want the seat pan supported by the fuselage, not by the bolts that mount it in. So you want weight in here when you drill the holes so that the bolts are kind of neutral when you've got people sitting here. So I'll have to get some friends in here to help me out with that. But yeah, right now it's just roughed in, and it's looking pretty good. So let's talk about the baggage. So here's what the baggage area is looking like right now. We've got the three pieces of floorboard. Like I had said in the previous video, I got the extended baggage bay option from Kitfox, which means your baggage goes from here to here. And the kit will come with 2 pieces of floorboard that are kind of split lengthways down the middle, down like here. So I changed it to be split here, kind of across the way, so that it kind of sat on the supporting bars a little bit better, and that came out pretty nice. Then I did make this third piece of floorboard just optionally in case I want to extend the baggage down like Brian Bowen did. Still haven't necessarily decided on that yet, but it's there if I need to do it. And while we're here, the tail wheel is also installed. Haven't configured it in any way, just literally bolted it on. And it was probably the easiest thing I've done in the airplane so far, in that it just bolted straight on. Now let's look at the other wheels. So the last part of today's update, and what I think really ties it all together, is the airplane is now sitting on its main landing gear. I have installed the gear legs and the wheels. Like I mentioned, I'm going with the Behringer wheels, so I got the black colored wheels, and the tires I have here are Desser's 27.5 inch Aeroclassic Tundra tires, and they're big. They look awesome. So this was a breeze as well, getting this installed. I want to say thanks to Boris for coming out and helping me. There's a little bit of weight in this to lift up and hold in place, but it's awesome. It's all looking like a real airplane now. So I'm going to leave this video here and end it. I don't know what I'm doing next, but I know for the next 7 to 10 days, I'm just going to be sitting in here and making airplane noises. So thanks for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.